Okay, well, welcome everyone to Finding Good Franchises. This is the show dedicated to helping franchise buyers find clear and truthful guidance to franchise ownership. I'm your host, Sabrina Wall, and on today's show, what we're going to be doing is diving into the question, should I become a franchise owner or not? And this is really we're about bringing clear and truthful guidance to franchise opportunities. And so we're really going to be discussing the reality of buying a franchise. So we're going to start with pros and cons of franchising, and then we're going to move into the franchise system, and we're going to talk about things like what it is and the flaws, what to look out for. We're going to also talk about the psychological experience of this kind of purchase and a few other things as well. You know, buying a franchise, it really is a big decision. And for some people, it's the biggest and largest purchase that they've ever made in their life. And it's a time where you have a lot of emotions that are coming up, and you're thinking and planning and trying to figure out what to do and how to do it. And there's a lot of dreaming that comes into it and envisioning who you want to be. And when we think about it, we all want success. We want happiness and security in our journey along the way, right? And some of those things are not that easy to achieve. And a lot of times a journey is bumpy, it's messy, and it's hard. And sometimes it can really hurt. And business ownership, that's really no exception. In fact, business ownership is one of the best growth experiences that someone can take on. You know, I'd like to think of it like it's the best workout for your mind, because it pushes you to expand who you thought you can be and grows that confidence in you and that ability to do different things. It teaches you how to manage and work with communication styles and different relationships so that you can have successful relationships long term. It teaches you how to do a lot of different skills so that you are very well-rounded and can do a skill, test a skill, and learn how to do it. And so that expands your ability as well. It teaches you how to manage finances and to grow wealth, and that's really important. And ultimately, it teaches you to see what you're made of. And I feel that we're all capable of so much, and yet most of us, we settle for this kind of watered down version of ourselves that's just mediocre. But our truth, you know, the real truth, the one that's inside, it's where we know that we can be exceptional. And if we're given that right guidance and nurturing, and we have the right kinds of people come around us to support us and help us to be our biggest and brightest version of ourselves, that's what we know. And it's just, how do we find it? How do we get there? And what's stopping us along the way? You know, what is stopping you from that? I think it comes down to reality, right? You know, the knowing that things can go wrong and that risks are real and that you can get hurt along the way. That's usually what's stopping people. And so a lot of times people will let that be more powerful than the version of themselves that they know they're capable of, and that deep down they know they can be. And franchising, it's often a way for people to kind of venture into business ownership because it can be safer for them. And with a franchise, you can run a business where you have more insight into what's going on in that business, and ultimately more control and guidance from the franchise system, and really support around the venture that you're trying to achieve. And if you were doing it on your own, you wouldn't have that same level of support. Now, it doesn't eliminate the risk. it just makes it a lot more manageable, and you can calculate the risk better so that they're smarter risks that you take. And when they're done correctly, you can really start to have a franchise that is an incredible success, and you're able to get to that success much, much quicker. So I know I'm kind of like teeter-tottering back and forth between these ideas. And the reason why is because that's what happens in this process of discovery. You go back and forth as you're trying to figure out whether or not you should buy a franchise. So I wanted to introduce our panel. We have with us Eric Reese, who is a partner at Lathrop Engage. Lathrop GPM. And this is a law firm that is, they've got 500 attorneys across the country, nationwide. They represent many large franchise brands, hundreds of brands. He's also 2020 and 2021's Best Lawyers in America award recipient. He's a CPA, a business advisor, and an independent business owner. So he definitely has a lot of experience in business on all sides. Then we also have Amanda Ramirez. So Amanda is a national franchise trainer. She's also an award-winning franchise broker, and she's worked with international clients and immigration clients. So people who are coming to the US to purchase a franchise. So she helps them find the franchise to purchase, and then she has done everything from helping them obtain their visas, build out their locations, manage those locations, and she's done that with investors all over the country. And I'm Sabrina Wall. I'm the CEO of the Franchise Brokers Association. I'm also a national franchise trainer, and I owned and operated or ran for investors about 27 different franchise locations within 4 different franchise systems. So just have a lot of experience that we're going to share with you today and help you along the way. So welcome, Eric and Amanda, to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So let's start off with talking about what are some of the biggest reasons why someone would be interested in buying a franchise in the first place? Who wants to start? Amanda?
Sure. Well, I'm a big fan of franchising, but franchising is not for everyone, right? So when we're trying to assess what are some of the pros of starting a franchise system, the first thing that comes to mind is scalability, right? So what is the quickest way that you can grow a business and grow into multiple units in multiple territories if you're doing it on your own versus going into a franchise? So I have found that a lot of times when you're doing it on your own, it becomes very difficult, very expensive, and it's just a nightmare to do it independently. Where if you're in a franchise system, you're gonna be locked in a territory. However, it allows you to have a plan, a development plan to start with one, and then your second, and you can actually hire the same employees and you can save on your payroll costs. So your overhead, it still becomes lower as you grow the system. So that's one of the benefits that I find extremely helpful when you're trying to assess to see if a franchise is for you or not.
What do you mean you can hire the same employees?
Yeah, so depending on where the location is going to be. So let's give North Carolina as an example. So you have Raleigh, you have Charlotte. So you have these territories that are kind of close to one another. So instead of you having to, and most people do want to take a step back from the business at some point, right? So they don't have to be an owner operator for the rest of their lives. So when they're ready to go and hire a manager, they can actually hire a manager to manage more than one location. So they're paying one salary, and that manager is now responsible for 3 locations instead of 1. And that's with one salary that you're paying. So it allows you to focus on the business, not in the business. So you're not day to day in that particular location. And it's really hard to do that when you just own when you own multiple locations. It's almost impossible. So that's one of the examples. The other way would be if the location has part-time employees, you can actually make them full-time so they can work at that one location part-time, and they can go to the other location and work part-time as well, making it full-time, and now you have one payroll cost.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. What about you? Why, Eric, why would somebody want to buy a franchise? Why would that be an option?
Well, so, usually when we talk, it's like you're reading my mind. You brought up risk. First of all, the biggest reasons to buy a franchise to me is business ownership, owning your own business. Anyone who's employed, and let's use employment for a second in the general sense, anyone who's got to earn a living, which includes most of us, all right? We're subject to what I call general risks. Those are risks of the economic downturn or economic cycle, risks of who's going to be in the White House. All of these risks, everyone who has to earn a living is subject to. However, as an employee of someone else, you're also subject to a whole host of unique or specific risks, like, does your boss like you? Did management decide that they're going to save some money this year, meaning you're going to be canned, all right? These are risks that you can eliminate through business ownership. It's the reason why I not only own this law firm, but I also own various other businesses, and within the law firm, I own all of my own clients, which means all of my efforts directly impact how I do in my bank account, right? I believe that you can only achieve that if you control, and this is gonna sound like I'm, an economic theorist, but I believe this, if you control the actual thing, the business that's producing the work, producing the revenue, all right? And again, business ownership is not for everyone. Like you said, it's scary. It is scary. It is scary to determine your own destiny because every dollar depends upon your effort. But if you eliminate the specific or the unique risks of being employed, then you never have a year where you say, I worked really hard and I wasn't rewarded for it. You get that a lot being an employee, particularly in the economy that cycles. And so number one, you get rid of a whole host of risks related to generating income, providing a living for yourself and for your family. The more specific reason to franchising is that you buy into a system. As Amanda said, this system has been created for you, so all you have to do is follow it, all right? That's critical, all right? I always tell people, don't buy a franchise if you're not willing or able to follow a system. But if there is a system, it takes away a whole bunch of risk. Why? A proven system in franchising is just that, proven. You know, so long as you do your due diligence, the subject of another podcast that we gave, so long as you do your due diligence, you know that if you follow the system, you are going to achieve certain results. You don't get that if you're creating your own business. And finally, one of the advantages of buying into a franchise is brand value. If Amanda or Sabrina or I created our own unique business, we may have a location for me in St. Louis, for Amanda and others, Orlando or wherever, okay? You're never gonna have national brand value, or it's highly unlikely that you will. With a franchise, you get the potential of national brand value. What does that mean? That your customers come to you because of the brand. Even though your success depends upon your efforts, your customers don't necessarily depend upon your efforts. They're buying the brand. And when you sell the business down the road, which is a natural cycle of business ownership, you also benefit from enhanced brand value that comes with franchises. And it's fairly unique to franchising. Think McDonald's, all right? You can't buy a McDonald's these days, folks. So don't think about it too hard, but McDonald's has tremendous brand value, and everyone within the system is following the system. For me, it's a very good mental picture of what proper franchising should be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that brand value piece is something that a lot of people love and want, because a lot of people that go into franchising, they don't necessarily want to do sales. They want to open the business and to have it run, but the customers to come to them. But I don't know that it's possible for any business to not have some type of sales effort or some type of marketing effort. So I think as far as franchising goes, having started a bunch of businesses that are independent businesses and a bunch of franchises, it is like baffling to me and just truly remarkable how much easier it is to run a franchise than to start a business from scratch. It's just when you're starting a franchise, you don't have to figure everything out. Like it really is laid out for you. And when you're starting a business from scratch, you have to know everything. Like you have to solve every teeny tiny problem. And that takes a lot of time. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of risk. I remember one time, one of the founders actually of the Franchise Brokers Association, he said to me, he's a very, very successful businessman, entrepreneur, like really amazing person. But he said to me, every business that he's seen that starts from scratch, it usually takes about 6 years to really start doing well and making money. So you just need to have about a 6-year rope before you start doing really well in that business. That's a long time. A lot of people don't have that kind of time to wait for the business to really get as developed as it needs to be. And so when he would always suggest, like, we should buy franchises, we should buy this franchise. And he's kind of the one that spurred these ideas for us to start, running franchises for people. But that experience, he was right. Like when you buy a franchise, you're buying that system. So from a lifestyle and speed perspective, buying a franchise is a lot faster and it's a lot easier because you're not doing all the work. You're not having to figure out every piece of it. And those pieces can be intense to put together. Really,
well, yeah, it comes down to mistakes, right? So a good franchisor made the mistakes that you don't have to, all right? And people think that's a tricky sales like catchphrase. It's for real, right? That's why you're buying a franchise in part, because the franchisor has figured out the system. Mm-hmm. And, that's why I keep emphasizing, if you're going to buy a franchise, be willing to follow the system, but understand that's what is going to make you successful. If the franchisor says, I have tried that and it didn't work, but this does work, trust in the franchise, right? And that sounds a little bit like employment. It's not. It's smart business ownership, because I don't have to make those 5 years or 6 years of mistakes. She's referring, I think, to a good friend of mine, Peter Wolf. I don't have to make those 5 or 6 years of mistakes that if I was creating the business concept myself, I have to go through, I have to live through. Franchisor made the mistakes, they figured it out. Now I don't have to make those mistakes, which is which is very important because you're trying to reach sustainability, that point at which your business is paying you and you're not contributing capital to your business any longer. That's when it gets really good.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's also one other thing that I think is important to mention as far as franchising, and that's really that you have the ability to have economies of scale. So like if you're running a franchise, you're a franchise owner, then you are not just paying the regular retail price of products or services, you're paying the discounted rate that the franchise negotiates on behalf of other franchisees. Those are franchise owners. So they negotiate these prices and you get that discount. And then franchisors, that's like the system. Oftentimes they'll do things like they'll have a call center that answers all the incoming calls and books appointments for the local franchise owner's business. And so you're not having to manage that staff and be always on call waiting for the phone to ring and taking those leads. You can just look at your calendar and see the appointments, see where your employees are going on their routes and things, and you can see what's happening, but not have to be the one that's always picking up the phone. And that's impossible with a small business, regular small business. All right.
Yeah, I agree. You've got the power. Everybody's buying together, right? So if Sabrina, Amanda, and I each had our individual business and we had to buy pencils. I know that seems like a silly example, but the pencils I'm buying are the pencils that you buy at Walmart or at some office supply company. As a group, I know 3 doesn't seem like much, but with these franchise systems, it may be 1,000, it may be 2,000. As a group, your purchasing power increases immeasurably. Also something that you can't achieve with an individual business ownership, or let's call it an independent business concept that you created.
Yeah. All right. So we talked about, did you want to say something, Amanda?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of mention, and this is pros and cons, but I'm going to put it in the pros.
And cons next.
Well, it's still a pro because I think there's a huge misconception when it comes to the fees, right? So not everybody, but a lot of my candidates, they're asking me, why am I paying so many fees? Why am I paying, a national advertising, local marketing, and royalties? When in reality, when you actually look at the breakdown of the fees, the majority of the fees are the cost of doing business.
Yeah,
so really your main fees are going to be the royalties and are going to be, your national advertising. Everything else you would have to spend if you started your own business anyway. And going back to ramping up the business, understanding where you're going to find your location, understanding who your vendors are going to be, what POS system you're going to use, all of those things that people take for granted, and they go in and they think they're going to figure it out quickly, but it can take years and so much money for you to find the right vendors. So economies of scales, it's a real thing, and it's a huge benefit that you get by starting a franchise.
Yeah, that's so true. People don't take into account that you would have been spending that money anyway, and you probably would have spent more because you would be the one that's having to produce it, and you would be the one that's having to manage it and source it. Like all of that stuff takes time and it costs money. It's not free. So with franchising, you're getting the structure of, you're paying this amount for this category, this amount for this category, and you would have been spending that money anyway. It's just you're spending it in a way where you're getting more out of those dollars.
And I just want to, this is just a comment that I want to make, and this is a question for Eric because I know he does this every single day, and it's a question that people have as well, which is, the franchise fee, which is that huge fee, right? It's what? No, it can range from 25 all the way to 50,000. So
more than that. They're raising, there's a lot of really high franchise fees these days.
Right. So what is the franchise fee used for?
Yeah. So first of all, people who are not familiar with franchising, let me make it very simple. A franchise is simply an intellectual property license agreement. That's all it is, right? So the franchisors develop this system, trademark, trade slogans, trade dress, in all parts of the system. Best way to think of a system is, how do I do this business? That's the system. And everything associated with it, the way to buy a product, the way to sell, the prices that you set for your products or services. All of these things are part of the system. And the franchisor has a right. The franchisor has to make money too, folks, okay? So it's not a benevolent organization, these franchisors. They need to make money too for all the development of the system that went before you and the continued development of the system. These things they're not stagnant, they keep developing over time as the market changes. But in addition to a royalty, as Amanda indicated, there are other fees too. There may be a technology fee. A technology fee helps the franchisor cover the costs of the website that they're maintaining on your behalf. You don't create your own website. The franchisor develops that. The franchisor may have other computer systems. They may be proprietary, they may be off the shelf, but with some modifications. Again, this is to help cover costs, as Amanda and Sabrina indicated, that you would incur otherwise, only with more frustration, because now you got to develop the website, and your website developer, he or she turns out to be a hack, and believe me, there are plenty of those people out there. Your website doesn't work, your ordering system doesn't work. It can be a nightmare. Talk about 6 years to profitability. It may be even longer just to figure out how to get a website that works, if you're going to be sophisticated, taking online ordering, etc., that sort of stuff. However, there's also an initial fee. It's the down payment to get into this intellectual property license agreement. Generally, that's allocated toward all part of the expenses that were incurred by the franchisor to onboard you, to get you into the system, which includes not only brokerage commissions. It's not a dirty word. Franchisors pay brokerage commissions just like you pay brokerage commissions in real estate, just like commissions are paid when you buy a car. There are commissions that are paid to salespeople. That's part of the fee. Part of the fee is allocated to training. They're going to train you, which is usually a week or 2 weeks or even more with some franchisors. You've got to be trained. Part of it is allocated to the general development cost of the system. Part of it is allocated to the things that you're going to get as part of the franchise system: an operations manual, ongoing support. The development of all this infrastructure costs a lot of money, and all of it is allocated to these things. Generally, those initial fees have zero profit in them, and I've spoken to many franchisors who say, we actually lose money on onboarding a franchisee. And I know that seems like, oh, sure, you're losing money on a $50,000 initial fee. It's incredible the cost of developing the system to where it can be sold and bringing on someone who didn't know anything about that business and making them an expert in that business. Incredible costs are involved. And also, Amanda, just to be complete, sometimes franchisors say the initial fee is X dollars, but it's not really just in the nature of an initial fee. They may throw in some equipment packaging that they're going to send. They'll package up equipment for a startup. They may have signage. They may have other things. Every franchisor, let's back up. Any franchisor can do it different than any other franchisor. So it's not just empty fees. It may be, Sabrina and I worked with one recently with a fairly high initial fee.
125,000.
Yeah, and I said, Sabrina, that just seems, I'm not cheap, but that just seemed a little wacky, right? And Sabrina came back and she said, well, if you look at the FDD, Mr. Expert, you'll see that the franchisee is getting a lot in the startup package in connection with that fee.
Yeah,
so I don't know if that answers the question, Amanda, but generally those fees are in part controlled through the market, right? If I'm going to buy a carpet cleaning franchise, I don't know why I came up with that, but it just popped into my head, probably because the carpet in my office is disgusting and we need a carpet cleaner. But if you're going to buy a carpet cleaning franchise, for example, and there are 20 carpet cleaning franchises out there, generally I find those initial fees to be fairly consistent among those carpet cleaning franchises. And folks, the other thing is that, remember, this is not, you're not trapped into buying a franchise. There's like, I don't know, 9,000 or 10,000 franchises out there. Part of the benefit of working with people like Sabrina and Amanda is they help you narrow that down. So ultimately, if there's something relating to one franchise that's rubbing you the wrong way, gee whiz, I don't like their initial fee, that doesn't really fit into my budget, well, you're in luck, because there's a ton of franchises that offer less initial fees. So remember, it's just a very broad industry as to what you might be getting into. And it's not just McDonald's and it's not just carpet cleaning. It's everything you can imagine.
So we talked about a lot of the pros, a lot of the reasons why you would go into franchising. Why would someone avoid franchising? Why would someone say, no, I don't, that this isn't for me? Or what do you need to know about franchising if you are going into it that can help you be aware? Eric, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Well, we'll start with the same answer, risk, right? There's capital risk involved. A lot of folks that I work with that buy franchises have been lifelong employees for somebody else. And for the first time, perhaps, they're putting 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 or more at risk of their own money. And there are no guarantees. Who would have thought on January 1st of 2020 that we would have a global pandemic? I didn't know what pandemic meant. I had to look it up, all right? So 2020 has been a wild ride for sure. So there are always things that can happen that are putting your capital at risk. Now, again, I'm not trying to argue for franchising, but understand also that about 50% of the deals that I do are funded with a 401k or IRA. It's money that these people have invested anyway, that is generally invested heavily in the stock market. Well, if anybody knows anything about the stock market, it is also subject to economic cycles, all right? In 2008, when we went through our last big recession, I think they called 401ks 201ks or something like that. You lost half the value. There's always risks associated with those sorts of things too. But there's a capital risk. There's no doubt about it. Another con, I guess, is if you're not a system follower, if you're somebody who likes to figure it out for yourself, if you're someone who doesn't like to take instruction, I would probably be a bad franchisee, to be quite honest with you, okay? Because as Sabrina knows, she's known me for a quarter of my life. She will tell me to my face, you don't take instruction well. And she does not mean that as a compliment, all right? But it's true, all right? But it's really not instruction. It's a proven system, so you would be silly not to follow it. But if you're the type of person who doesn't want to follow it, then franchising, I would say, would not be for you. The other things that people may consider cons, for example, Amanda brought up a territory. You're restricted generally with franchising to a particular territory. But think about it, folks. If you open up a business that is an independent business, your market is only going to be so big anyway. One of the things that you should ask in due diligence of a franchisor is, okay, you're giving me this radius, you're giving me 50,000 people or what have you. How did you come up with that? All right. Franchisors have a system. They usually didn't guess at it. All right. And so they can tell you, well, we have found over the years that 95% of your customers would come from that radius. So even that is really not a con related to franchising. Other people that I've talked to about cons of franchising, they said, well, what about competition? Isn't that a con? It's like competition exists no matter what you do, all right? You can sell tennis shoes and competition exists. You cannot get away from competition. So that really isn't a con either. So really the biggest cons are you're going to put capital at risk, and you may not be used to doing that. You're going to put capital at risk for all the reasons and the benefits of owning not only a franchise, but just business ownership. And you're going to be required to follow a system. And that's not for everyone. I would say those are the major cons of it.
I have a hard time with the following the system kind of conversation. Of course, that's what everybody in franchising says. They all say you have to follow the system, follow the system. Mm. But oftentimes people will say that if you can't follow a system or you're more entrepreneurial, don't go with franchising. But I have seen that, you know, even in my experience, I'm definitely more entrepreneurial. I like to innovate. I like to test new things. I like to try new things. But going through that experience independently, starting independent businesses, it gave me a real appreciation for not having to do everything. Yeah. So even though I'm like that, I still work well in franchising because I don't want to have to do everything. Like, I don't want to have to figure it all out all the time now. Now it's like, okay, well, we can just run the franchise. Now, the other side of it, though, is I will challenge the franchisor when I think, you know, something isn't being done an appropriate way. And I think if people don't know how to have healthy debates, you know, healthy conversations in that way, that it can create bad blood between the franchisor and the franchise owner. Yeah. So I think that's something to keep in mind. But if you're strong enough as a professional and a business person that you can have healthy conflict and you can work through things together, then you can usually come up with a solution that you both work or that it works for both of you, because that's what you really want. Like you're on the same team. So if you remember that and remember the partnership, you can get to the right outcome because you both want the same thing.
Yeah,
and I think that's, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think that following a system means you have to trade in your entrepreneurial spirit, okay? So most of the franchisees that I've seen become very successful, they satisfy their entrepreneurial urges, their urges to be a legacy builder through the purchase of multiple units, mm-hmm. through the purchase of multiple systems. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of clients that are heavily into franchising, but they don't own just one particular brand. Right. They may own 3 of these and 3 of that and 3 of those. And they're certainly entrepreneurs, and they certainly have built their empire, for lack of a better term, through their entrepreneurial drive. But they understand within the empire, they run their sandwich shops like this, they run their carpet cleaning or commercial cleaning like this, and they run these other industries like that. And so you're not really trading an entrepreneurial spirit. And of course, I'm just joking about being a troublemaker. Not really, but again, I challenge everything. It's just something in my nature.
Me too.
The bigger the brand, the more restrictions they're gonna have.
Yeah.
So when you're working with somebody and you're trying to understand which system you want to go with, the whole entrepreneurial spirit thing does make a difference depending on the system that you choose. I've had situations where my candidate wanted to go with a brand that had over 200 units, very well established, has been around for more than 10 years. They had a proven system, they had brand recognition, but they did not negotiate anything in the agreement. Mm-hmm. And he was gonna have to follow the system 100%. So now the question is, if you are that creative entrepreneurial person who wants to have a say, who wants to work with the franchisor, who wants to test the products and actually be a part of growing the system, that brand may not be for you. This is why I'm a big fan and a big believer in emerging brands, because emerging brands, they're still new, but not necessarily new in business. So there's still a lot of flexibility. And when I say flexibility, I'm talking about there's a lot of flexibility in the size of the territory that you get, in the things, and even the suggestions that you have, that you can test things out and you can communicate with the franchisor directly because you're still one of the first franchisees. Some people say it's a bigger risk, but you really have to identify, what is it that you want for your life? Most people that started a McDonald's, since we're talking about McDonald's, most people who started a McDonald's 40, 50 years ago, right now they're millionaires and they own 20, 30 locations. But if you ask now if you can get into McDonald's, it's probably not going to happen because it's too late, right? So yes, that is a big, big component. And I don't like to say it's not a pro or a con, it's more of the fit, right? So who are you going to be as a franchisee? Are you trying to grow into multiple units? Are you trying to dominate your market? Are you trying to go and have presence all around? The only way to do that is with a newer franchise system, but you also have to align with the vision of the franchisor. I hate to say it, but some franchisors are not going to be a good fit for you, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not that they're bad. It's not that it's a negative thing. I mean, some of them do suck. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, right?
Yeah, some of them are bad.
I mean, there's no such thing as a, like when you look into a franchise, it's not about, yes, a franchise is going to give you this. That's not true. You are going to find some bad franchises out there. They exist. And there are some franchisors who are not doing the right thing and not following what a good franchisor is supposed to be doing. So you need to identify, are you that entrepreneurial person who wants to maybe change even the way that you hire people? I know because this happened to me. One of my candidates wanted to have 1099 employees instead of W-2, but the model said W-2. So he actually started with a newer franchise system. He got along great with the franchisor, and they actually did they figured out a way to have both employees, and it worked out for the system and for that individual franchisee. So, that's just one point that I wanted to make, because it's, the stages of growth of a system, where do you want to be? And this is something that you can only figure out really by either working with somebody who understands it or just really knowing how to do proper due diligence when you're researching a franchise.
So when people are going through the process of finding a franchise and researching a franchise, I tend to notice that they think the franchise system is perfected, like it's perfect the way that it is. They know what they're doing. They've proven the system. And my experience is it's a business, and there are people running that business, and there are always things that they're working on and improving and working through. Just like if you were a business owner, you're never going to have a perfect business. And so the thing that we talk about all the time is that we want people to have a clear picture and a true picture instead of a perfect picture. And I think that's hard for a lot of people to grasp and understand, because when they're going through the research process, if there's something that's not perfect with that franchise system, they can often, discard the franchise and stop going any further just because they've found something that isn't, perfect. And I think that is kind of a bad way of operating as you're researching a franchise, because you haven't given yourself enough information to even make a true decision about that franchise. You have to look deeper. And I think a lot of times people don't recognize that the franchise is more than just this like business in a box. It's a relationship, it's a partnership. And so being a partnership, you have to be able to work with people, and you have to be able to work through whatever those issues are or challenges are, and allow the space for them to have an open, honest discussion with you. The way that buyers kind of operate now, it almost dissuades franchise sales professionals from bringing all the information forward, because if they do, the buyer would be so like scared or skittish that they'd run away. And so we want to just kind of empower people that it's okay to know all the sides of the story. Like, it's okay that a franchisor has, they're working on this one thing. They don't have it perfected yet, but they're working on it. And is what they're doing satisfactory to you? So I want to just kind of empower all of you to keep looking, keep talking to the franchise. Don't immediately just discard them if you find one thing on their record that you don't like. You have to look at the whole picture and consider more than just those one or two elements. I think that's really important, because it shows not only their character and what they're willing to share with you, but it shows your character too. If you're the type of person that is going to give people a fair shot, you are going to listen and to hear and do the research so that they can present themselves and show you their opportunity and who they are as a company. Well, then you're being fair. You're starting that relationship off better. And that, I think, is a con of franchising in the franchise award process, because a lot of the sales reps, they put so much into teaching people about the franchise and, helping to qualify them. But then there's that like skittish behavior. So they don't, they don't always share as much. So we want to empower them to be more clear and honest. And we want to empower you to be able to accept that and work through it,
Yeah, I think the word relationship is well put. I do not go into business with people who are not like me. And Sabrina, as much as she'll deny it, okay, we're a lot alike more than we are dissimilar. All right, I'm better looking, but that's something that Sabrina's had to deal with for a long time.
A long time. It's been painful.
But see, so it goes back to choice. You've got a lot of choices when it comes to franchises. I agree with Amanda. There are charlatans out there. There's charlatans in every industry, but you have a lot of choice, all right? There are some franchisors that are owned by people that you don't get the right vibe from. It's important, folks. This is a long-term relationship that you're entering into. There are some franchise systems that have franchisees that you don't get the right vibe from. You should fit within a system. And the good news is that by me saying you should fit within a system, am I excluding some franchises from your consideration? Of course. But why would you want to be in business with those people anyway? People like those who are like themselves. The first lesson of sales is people like those who are like themselves, which is a relationship principle, right? You want to be around those people who give you energy, who you trust, who you support, who will support you. And all of that is available. Now, Amanda and Sabrina can't say off the top of their heads, well, you're definitely going to fit within this system. But again, that's part of the exploration. And the other thing I'm going to say is, when you're talking to these people that own the franchise or the people who are licensing the IP to you, the intellectual property to you, and when you're talking to the people who own the franchisee units, all right, those are the people that are operating the individual franchised units out there, you're looking for honesty, okay? In today's world, honesty seems harder and harder to come by, but it's those people who honestly believe in their system, in their brand, in their product, in their service, who will be successful in the long term. As Amanda said, you know, there are some people out there who are kind of peddling their franchises or peddling their brands. They don't believe in their value proposition. What you're looking for is honesty. And a good franchisor, despite he or she having some scars, he or she having made some mistakes, is going to be able to honestly discuss these things with you prior to you entering into that relationship. The very first thing that I assess when I'm talking to someone, whether it's telephonically or via Zoom or in person, is do they have an honest belief in the value proposition that they're saying they stand for? It's a great way to assess whether you do or do not belong within a franchise system, in my opinion.
Well said. All right, so Amanda, we have kind of talked about franchising. We've talked about some of the things that go on with the franchise system. You help buyers all the time to go through the emotional experience of becoming a franchise owner. And you kind of help them go through those ups and downs, because each new piece of information is a different an emotional charge with it. So can you just talk about how you help people be successful in that discovery process, even though there are good and bad things happening? As we're being clear and truthful, you're going to hear good stuff, you're going to hear bad stuff. How do you help them to manage that?
Yeah, that's a great point. And it is one of the most difficult, I would say, part of the process. And at every step of the way, you have a lot of fear going on, which is normal. So I will say that the number one reason why people get fearful is because of they're getting the one-sided information, and because they don't have proper knowledge, they freak out. And they're not allowing themselves to actually dive in and research the reason why that statement was said, or maybe they validated with the franchisee and they heard some really negative things and now they decided to drop out, right? So I face that, I encounter that every single day. And what I tell my candidates is that, look, you chose to speak with this brand. So let's kind of go back to the beginning. Why did you even choose to talk to them, right? So you clearly, you have an interest. you're looking for a franchise, you have an interest. I did tons of research, and I know it's a fit, but we still have to do our due diligence. So we still have to figure out what's happening. So I can't tell you if the research is going to be 100% effective. You know, some things may happen along the way, but how do we actually validate on whether that is a red flag or not? So we have to look at both sides. So when you hear something negative that came from the franchisor, and this is one of the huge benefits of working with a franchise broker, is because we're not stuck on that brand. We're here to kind of help you figure out what, you know, is this information truthful or is this a red flag? We've been in the industry for a very long time. This is not even something that you probably will not know. So we have to talk things through, right? So the franchisee may tell you, oh, I'm not making any money, you know, it's taking me forever to break even, and I don't recommend this brand, right? So instead of you just completely getting turned off by the brand, you know, when you talk to me about it, well, let's actually ask the right questions. So let's figure out which types of questions we're going to be asking to understand whether that franchisee is following the system, whether that franchisee was even the right fit for the brand in the first place. You know, there are bad brands, period. So you put them in the bad category, but there's also good franchisees that are the right fit for the brand and bad franchisees that are going with the good franchise because they just, you know, when you look at the role of the owner, it doesn't match because the things that they have to do in order to grow the business, it's not a strength that that franchisee has. Right. So the emotional process is going to happen. But you know, when you're working with a professional, we're going to help you figure out whether that information is actually truthful or not. And it's by having conversation and it's by questioning the franchisor. So to Eric's point, you know, one of the things that, you know, it happens all the time is, you know, how do you know if they're telling the truth, right? So, and we know we have questions that we can give you and they're pretty clear. You know, it gets the amazing thing about franchising is it gets to the point where we just know which questions to ask and they're going to have to tell you yes or no. And if they tell you something other than what we're thinking they're going to say, we automatically know that it's a red flag, right? So questions like, how many terminations have you had in the past 3 years? If they don't know that, something is up. If they cannot talk openly about that, something is up. And look, there's no such thing as 100% retention rate. I mean, that's unheard of. It's very rare. There's always going to be terminations in the system, but what is the reason why? I would say another question would be, I think it's really the marketing piece. I think everybody wants to get free leads, right? So you start a system and you automatically want to get all these customers coming to you. But there's work that needs to be done in the background. So some franchisors will do more for you on lead generation. And most people get terrified of the marketing piece and they want to get full clarity on that. So when you're validating, you're asking those questions. So how much business are you getting from the corporate office? You know, how much business are you getting from your local market? You know, what are the things that you're doing in your local market that's attracting customers? Can you validate that the franchisor is actually giving you that lead generation support that they claim that they're doing? So at the end of the day, I know it's a lot, I discussed a lot here, but it's strategizing prior to the call happening, giving you the tools so you can ask the right questions. And if the red flag comes up, we need to address it.
I think you said something that was really important when they're on a validation call and they hear a bad validation. You were saying that you know, you have to ask more questions. And a lot of times people will take that at face value, but they don't realize that that person's expectations of not succeeding may be completely different than normal expectations. So like where a normal person would say, hey, I broke even in 6 months and I'm making money after 6 months, that person may be, I had a goal of doing it in 2 and I didn't hit it. So you always have to ask those second and third follow-up questions to make sure you really are understanding their perspective and not just taking it at face value, because it's usually a bigger and wider story. So we are at the end of our show. I wanted to thank both of you for coming on and thank all of you for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you here. We do have a few questions, so I will go ahead and open those up, and we'll answer those for anyone who wants to stay on. Is the franchise fee negotiable? Eric?
Yeah, and so it all depends, right? Everything is negotiable. A lot of people think that franchising is some sort of a lockstep with respect to its fees, et cetera. It is not typically negotiated. And the reason why it's not typically negotiated is there's a whole set of disclosure rules that franchisors have to follow. And there's a document called the FDD, which we'll get more into, I assume, on perhaps other broadcasts. It's a monster, right? It's required by the federal government and many state governments. And they have to disclose, among other things, the range of fees that they've accepted over the prior 12 months. And so one of the reasons why the franchisor does not like to negotiate that fee is because they got to disclose it. So they make a deal with you, they're going to be making a deal with the next person, unless the person is a knucklehead, because if you read the FDD and you see a low range, I'm going to ask for the lower amount. I think it's important, and perhaps this will be another broadcast. I think it's important to know what to ask for if you want to negotiate your franchise documents. It's not only making sure you have an expert helping you who understands franchising, but know what is typically and not typically negotiable. So I know that's a longer answer than you probably wanted. Is it negotiable? Yes. Will it be negotiated, at least the initial fee? Likely not if you're buying a single unit. However, if you're buying multiple units, it generally decreases substantially for the second, third, fourth unit, et cetera. And so there's some relief there too. I guess I'll just leave you with, you don't get anything unless you ask for it, but we try not to ask for things that a franchisor is going to get frustrated with. Because remember, this is an award process. A franchisor who is doing it correctly actually cares about who they take into their system. They don't want knuckleheads. They want people who are going to be successful franchisees. So I think it is important, again, we'll leave it for another broadcast, to know what sort of experts to use when you're getting into the franchising industry.
Great, thank you. We have another question. It says, during the last 5 months, I've been educating myself on franchising to know, is this the right step for me? I've been attending 4 to 5 webinars. I have read 2 franchising books, and I'm still not completely sure if this is the right pathway for me. Can you help me to define, is franchising right for me, and how can you help? Amanda, do you want to take that one?
I would need more information because clearly you've been doing your research, so you probably have a lot of the foundation that you need to kind of figure out. But I think it's very important that you have an actual conversation with somebody about that, because we can tell you, you know, what are your goals and can you achieve those goals with a franchise. So it's going to be really difficult for you to just listen to our webinar and know what the answer is, I'm more than happy to have, a 30-minute, 20-minute conversation with you, and we can kind of figure out where you are and if this is something that we could explore. At the end of the day, if it's not the right fit, I'm going to tell you, because I have no reason to want to work with somebody if business ownership and not a franchise, or even staying in corporate America, it's whatever path is going to be what it is that you're looking for. So I know I haven't answered the question completely, but we just have to get on a call and I can kind of explain and give you some more information on if this is right for you or not.
Yeah, I think the other thing to keep in mind is in today's age, everybody has an opinion on everything and they express it on the internet, okay? And in books. Oh, well, I've read a best-selling author and he said, you want to know how many texts I get a day offering to make me a best-selling author? This is a whole industry now, okay? You don't even need to come up with a book. They have ghostwriters. You give them a few ideas and bada bing, bada boom, you're a best-selling author. And really all I'm doing is expressing my opinions in those books. So I think continue your research, but do talk to someone who's a lot closer to franchising. Amanda does that as part of her job. She, kisses a lot of frogs to find a prince. But that's part of what we do if we're truly trying to help people. So I think Amanda's answer is spot on, but don't make a decision based upon solely, well, this person who's a best-selling author says franchising is bad, because I guarantee you there's another best-selling author who says franchising is good. You need to get closer, I think, to the industry to make such a personal and as Sabrina said at the beginning, such an important decision.
Yeah, and just to that one more point is the average research for a franchise is about 3 months. It's not 3 months staying in the surface. It's 3 months of due diligence. So I think it's very, very important that you allocate the time to actually dive in and not be afraid of what it is that you're going to encounter. If you're just watching videos on if is franchising right for me, that's the first step. But you really need 10 steps for you to really figure out if this is the path for you or not. So just to kind of give you a time frame in mind, if are you doing 5 months of one step, or are you willing to commit 3 months and do the actual full due diligence?
Right, good. Okay. What are the top 3 mistakes a new franchise owner makes?
I think also I'll talk about one because I see it all the time. So the number one is, so every business is going to have KPIs that are given to you. So those are the key performance indicators, right? So when you become a franchisee of a system, it's no different than starting a business in that aspect, where they're going to give you a plan, and in order for you to hit break even at that month or at that time that you found out with your due diligence, you have to make sure that you are right in line with your percentages, right? So if your rent cost is at 10%, then you're going to make money by this month. If your payroll cost stays under 30%, I'm just kind of giving you ideas, but the franchisor is going to give you that. What I find is that a lot of people, when they start a business, they're so busy with everything else that they're not paying attention to the most important factor of the business, which is making sure that you're hitting those KPIs. So if you're not doing that, it's going to take you longer, and you're not focusing on the right things. So I would say that's number one.
Sales and finance. Those are the 2 things you have to master right off of the bat. And the franchisor will tell you how to do it. They'll set up the budgets with you. They'll set up their performers with you. So you know what you need to do. You know how to get the sales. You just have to make sure that you're implementing those things to get them. So that's definitely something that I always coach my candidates on, is that you've got to focus on these two things. If there's a bunch of admin work to do, that is third, fourth area, not even secondary. You have to focus on sales and focus on finance, how to make money, how to keep money. You do those two things and you're going to be all right.
I think there are three mistakes that will guarantee failure in franchising. Number one, undercapitalization. All right, franchisees who want to cut corners. Well, I know what my due diligence said. I know what item 7 in the FDD says. That's a range of investment. But I'm going to cut some corners here. All right, I'm going to save dollars. All right, big mistake. All right, if you don't have enough capital to do a franchise or any business properly, don't do that business. All right, because when you're out of money, you're out of money. And if you've not reached sustainability, no one's going to chip in and say, well, that's okay, buddy, I'll give you $100 grand. All right. Number 2, failure to do due diligence. Due diligence is one of the hallmarks of buying a franchise. People say, including me, there are no guarantees. Well, there almost are guarantees if you do the due diligence. And finally, 3, and I sound like repeating myself, failure to follow the system. Now I'm in it, but the franchisor says this location would be the best location, but I'm convinced that I know better because I'm a smart person. All right. You're not dumb for following the system, all right? So if you make any one of these mistakes, I think that you are at risk. But none of these mistakes should be made, right? Because you're going to work with professionals who actually know a thing or two about franchising.
All right, we have time for just another one or two. Let's see, what are the cost breakdown in general between initial investment costs, franchise fees, etc., versus recurring monthly annual franchisor costs? How much are we talking about? Can you be profitable minus the monthly royalties and fees and still make a good living? Eric, do you want to answer?
Yeah, of course.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the due diligence is for, folks. You're talking not only to the franchisor, you're talking to existing franchisees, and you're asking them questions like, how much money do you take home? That's what you should be asking. You don't ask them, what color is your car and what is your favorite type of food, all right? You ask them very important questions that you need answered. Do you follow the system? Do you find the system to be helpful? Do you make money? How long did it take you to make money? How many hours do you work a week? Guys, this is proper due diligence so that if you get consistent answers, sure, they're going to fluctuate. Amanda, Sabrina, and I could all be happy franchisees in the same system, and we're not going to say things the exact same way. We're not going to have the exact same opinions, but you're looking for a general consistency. And so the answer to your question is, of course, how do you know that for a particular system? You do your due diligence.
Yeah. We have resources for you guys as well. Like we have a accounting consultations where you can review numbers with the accountant. We have legal consultation where you can review questions about the legal process with the franchise. We have, access to funding experts that help you. Some of them will even help you to build out the pro formas and everything. So that information becomes evident in the due diligence process. A lot of franchises will report how much money their franchisees make. And then what you do is you try to get the cost. So you know what their revenue is, you try to get the cost from the franchisees. And we show you how to do that as part of the due diligence process.
Yeah, and just one last thing. So this was David who asked the question. So just to give you an example, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I am still working with 2 business partners, and you know, whenever you're talking about a partnership, you got to think about like now you have two people who need to make money, right? It's even more difficult. And they both have a finance background, and we've done about 4 months of due diligence. And let's just say that they had really aggressive goals for the type of income that they wanted to make. And they've decided on a franchise, and they're extremely happy with the decision that they've made. They've done performance, they've validated, and they feel confident that they're going to be able to more than achieve the financial goals that they have set for themselves. So just to kind of put that into perspective.
Sales and finance. Do those two things, you're going to be all right. Can a franchise be considered a security? Eric, I'll hand that one to you.
Well, first of all, any ownership in any business, whether it's a two-person LLC, subchapter S corporation, is considered a security, all right? However, in franchising, they're not selling you an ownership interest in the system, an ownership interest in the IP, or an ownership interest in the franchisor itself, the mothership, if you will. You're creating your own business. You may be selling a security if you're taking on partners, but just because it's not considered a security doesn't mean it's not heavily regulated. It is. It's regulated by the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, on a federal level, and then it's regulated by state law, either the state franchise law, state business opportunity law, and or there are various consumer protection laws out there that are designed for the protection of the prospective franchisee.
Wonderful. All right. It looks like that is the end of our questions. I want to thank everyone for joining us again. Thank you, Amanda and Eric. We really do appreciate everyone coming on. It was a fun session, and we hope to see you guys next time. We do have in 2 weeks, we have a franchisor speed round that will come at the same time on Tuesday at 5:30 Eastern. And this one, we're going to be talking about semi-passive franchises. So franchises that help people transition from corporate America, or if they own other businesses, or even if you're just somebody who wants a franchise for a good lifestyle, then semi-passive franchises can be an option for you. So we're going to go over 7 brands within that category, and we hope to see you next month on our Finding Good Franchises show. So thank you everyone so much. We hope you have a wonderful evening. Bye everyone.
See ya.